So let's look at the next slide, starting with one of our recommended best practices for advancing DEI. And I'm going to focus on leadership. It's become probably a truism that leadership matters, but it's worth focusing on this factor because the reality is, without committed, proactive leadership, diversity will fall backwards. It's not just about tone at the top. It's about leadership in actions, not simply words. No law firm can do well in developing and advancing talent, including women and lawyers of color, without strong actions and commitments at the highest level. You can't simply issue memos or strategic plans. Leaders need to talk about their expectations and goals and hold themselves and everyone at every level of leadership accountable for meeting those goals. A good leader demonstrates with actions, not just words, that diversity and inclusion are core parts of the firm's culture, and that even during a pandemic, those core parts of the culture will not take a back seat. The good leader shows the value of diversity to everyone in the firm, and part of that value is the business case for diversity. That with diversity and inclusion and advancement, the firm is in a stronger position for getting new business with new clients and existing clients. I mean, the tide has just about turned for large firms who represent corporations. Corporations are demanding diverse legal teams, and not just at the associate level. It's no longer discretionary. Diversity has become a business imperative. And with diversity as a core component, a firm can also recruit a wider array of talented lawyers. So diversity means gaining broader perspective to improve work products, not just to get the business. If we turn to the next slide, another form of recommended best practices for advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Another best practice is to use the necessary tools to see how the firm is actually doing. There are many different ways to measure the impact of remote work of DE&I. Not one way will work for every firm, but here are some suggestions. Look at work time. If you see that work for, let's say, associate lawyers of color is not at the same level as associate white lawyers, the question should be asked, what opportunities are we giving people? How are opportunities handed out? What can we do to make sure that work is distributed on an even keel? And it's not just what can we do, what must we do to make sure that work is going fairly to everyone? And I'm focusing on associates in particular because diversity within a firm often means larger numbers at the associate level and then a dramatic fall off at more senior levels. And it's fair to ask, are there impediments to getting work that the firm should do something about? It may be as simple, and in remote working, there are a lot of factors that impact remote working. I am friends with young lawyers. They're even struggling things like getting supplies because they're not going to leave their house and they don't want to spend hundreds or sometimes thousands of dollars that may be necessary. It may make sense, and it should probably be done, to keep affinity group sessions going strong as social and personal resources for lawyers to stay engaged with each other and to stay engaged with the firm. We know, as we've said before, from the recession 10 to 12 years ago, that there was a worst impact for lawyers of color, and especially for women of color. And as law firms are once again making difficult decisions about furloughs and compensation cuts and layoffs, they could do very well to ask, are implicit biases seeping into these decisions? Metrics and statistics should be used to measure and examine the hard data on work assignments, compensation, promotions, allocation of credit for business, client succession, participation on client pitches, and much more to ensure that women and lawyers of color are not getting shortchanged. Now, research has shown that remote working can have some advantages, but there are downsides, and one is reduced attorney engagement. And that's especially true for women and lawyers of color. A firm is well served when its leaders reach out to an array of attorneys, to diverse attorneys, to women, to make sure that they actively participate in meetings, that they receive the necessary resources. They have consistent access to new matters and new clients. And these are all factors that should be part of a bigger picture, goals for progress and a strategy. And today, in today's context, some of the traditional strategies may have to change. For example, work may have to be assigned differently than it was before. And there are different ways of checking in how groups are doing. It's not a hallway conversation. But there is no reason to change the goals for diversity, and the economics of the firm should not be an excuse to change those goals.